That was cute. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Ann. And I am a very, very, very grateful member of Al-Anon tonight. I wanted to just start by just thanking everybody who participated in this program this year and this weekend, the moderators, the speakers that volunteered. The outpouring of volunteers was wonderful. Everybody in the area was getting involved, and it just made our lives so much easier. And I don't know how you guys have done, but I have just had a wonderful weekend so far. Hope you've enjoyed it. And Lisa is really right about service and getting involved in this convention. It hit me in a late afternoon session. I was sitting in the back of the room, and I just started to cry because I realized, I want to do it again, that just a couple of months ago, the topic that I was sitting in the room listening to was a scribble on a scrap of paper. It was just a thought in somebody's mind. And it just totally overwhelmed me that two speakers had taken this little topic and related to it and made it come to life. And that's how this whole weekend has been, and it's just been a really beautiful thing. It's been great. And I don't know our keynote speaker very well. I've just been getting to know her the past couple of days. But I do want to share with you one little story about my service commitment this year. When Lisa asked me to be her program chair, I said, oh, okay, that's a different one. Okay, I'll do that. And the thing that scared me the most was the whole idea of having to pick a keynote speaker or keynote speakers. And I went to Connie, who said, just get out there, get the taper, let them know you need the tapes. They'll send you a whole bunch of sample tapes. You'll sit and listen to all of them. You'll weed them out, and you'll pick 3 or 4, and then you'll sit with committee members, and they'll sit and help you choose. And I thought, okay, fine. And I called the taper, and he sent me this box of like 30-some-odd tapes. Somebody said, oh, that must have been wonderful. That was work. That was really, really tough. And I stopped, and I said, all right, I talked to my higher power, who's God, and I just said, God, just help me. Pick somebody. You choose who the speaker's going to be. Just make the thoughts come into my mind or make me feel a certain way. And the weekend that I got the tapes was the New Hampshire convention. And I thought, great. Long ride up, long ride back. I'll just pop them in the car. And I did that, and it was a new car. And I had not bothered to look at the instructions for, how does that tape rewind and this, that, and the other stuff. I'm listening to a tape. I'm absolutely loving this tape. It's early on in the tape, and I go to back it up. And I push the button, and I push the wrong button, and next thing you know, this tape is stuck in my new car. And I said, okay, now what do I do? And I wasn't driving at the time, and I'm playing with a little plastic knife and all this stuff, and I finally was able to pop it out, and it broke. And I said, okay, well, and I was stressing over it, and Larry said, don't worry about it, play the other tapes. Okay. So I put it in the box, and that was that, and we listened to the tapes going up and the tapes coming back. But that one tape that broke was really bugging me, because I really liked that tape. And he said, well, if you liked it so much, just tell the committee that's the one you're picking. And I was like, no, I'm a good little Al-Anon. I can't just pick. I have to have the tapes. I have to put them together. We have to sit. We have to listen. They have to agree. I have to, And I got home that weekend, and there weren't enough days left for me to get a new tape. And talking about the patience thing, we were talking about patience at dinner. That tape was bugging me so much. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever played with these stupid little cassette tapes. They don't really come apart. They're like attached in the middle. I looked all over my house. I found all these weird little implements, paper clips, a broken knife, whatever. And I'm sitting there unscrewing these teeny tiny little screws, and I'm bending it up. Anyway, hour and a half later, Scotch tape, I did it, I put it together wrong. I undid it, did it again, put it together. I am not, ask friends, I am not a patient person. Why I didn't just toss this thing in the garbage after 2 seconds, I'll never know. But that was one of the tapes that I played for the committee members who came over and listened. Of course, it had a piece missing, but that was okay. It was a little tiny piece. And I popped in a different tape first, and we listened to it. We fast-forwarded and put in another tape, and they're saying, that's nice. And then I finally put this tape in, and after, I swear it had to be 2 minutes of words. They said, so did you ask this woman yet? Did you call her yet? Drove myself absolutely crazy. And what was it about the tape that got me? I listened to it, I related, I laughed, I cried, I was moved, and I just said, I got to ask this lady to be our keynote speaker. And I did. And on the first shot, I got her, and immediately she said yes. And I think that you're going to hear something really special tonight. So please help me welcome Larcine G.
Hi, everybody. My name is Larcine. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. I sure as hell hope that was my tape. The part missing probably was, hi, my name is. I want to thank you all for having us. We're just having a wonderful time. I've just really enjoyed everything. Barbie, you're absolutely sensational. A tough act to follow for sure, but I admire Al-Anon. I admire your story. I admire your courage, and I admire your sharing with everybody, you know, your heart and soul, because that's really what it's all about. And I don't know exactly how much time you've had in the program, but you can come to my meetings anytime you like. You are more than welcome. Thank you so much for... And certainly the other speakers, I want to thank Tom and his wife Mary and son Patrick and Megan, who I've gotten to know. The family meeting last night I thought was absolutely phenomenal. You know, I believe with all my heart, you know, that alcoholism is a family disease, and not whole families get healed and get into recovery like this family has. And talk about a circle of hope. It was absolutely wonderful, and I want to thank them very much, too, for their share, because it was really wonderful. And the AA speaker this afternoon, Paul, I just enjoyed that immensely. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I want to thank the committee and Mary Ann for asking me to be here. It's an honor and a privilege to get to be at an Al-Anon meeting, and I know tomorrow you're going to have a speaker in the morning, and she's a personal friend of mine, and I really you got to be here to hear Beverly in the morning because she's just $1 million, and you know, and it's one of the neat things that you get to do. You get to meet these people in the program you would never normally associate, and I doubt seriously that her and I would ever speak under any other circumstances. So that's just what gets to happen when you get here. And I want to say hello to Juanita, who is my friend. As soon as I got here, they gave me a sucker, and they said, "You want us to help you find her?" You know, and I'm like, heck no. You know, I can find an alcoholic. How hard is it going to be to find an Al-Anon person? I mean, especially at an Al-Anon convention. And it took a little bit of time, but I certainly did find her. And then my friend found me this afternoon, and I think that's really, really special. My husband is here with me today. Half the women in this conference think my husband's a giant pervert because he's been looking at everybody's chest. Looking for Heather. So Heather, please come up and say hi to my husband so we can do this deal. But that's a great thing. It's really wonderful. I think that's a lot of fun. And I definitely, you know, being here and going to all the meetings that I was able to go to today and hearing the sharing from, you know, the other speakers that had talked on the different topics that I was fortunate enough to get to go to. It's just been an absolutely tremendous job, and I want to congratulate the committee and everybody who has any hand in being of any kind of service, you know, because that's when you get back at the, you know, that's when you get everything back as giving. So, you know, my hat's off to you, and thanks so much for feeling us feel welcome. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like for me today. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. My dad was a master sergeant in the Army, so that made me automatic corporal of my family. My husband jokes that I came out of the womb carrying a clipboard, wearing an armband, and he's not too far offline. I'm very, very responsible, and I love to be in charge of stuff, and it's just the way I am. It's just the way I was born. I don't know if it's in my DNA or what, but that's just the way it was. And you know, and you know, and the proof is, you know, even as a kid when I was in school, the teacher left the room, I was automatically room monitor. You know, then I was playground monitor, cafeteria monitor. You know, because I it's very important to me. You know, when people do something wrong, I think somebody should write it down and report it to the proper authorities. I don't know. It's just. You know, and for me, it's, you know, it just came natural to me. I didn't care how big the kid was, if it was a guy, if he was going to beat me up, if he did something wrong, I wrote it down and I told the teacher as soon as she got back. And that's just all there is to it, because I'm a big rule and regulation person, and growing up in the Army, and I really consider the fact that I grew up in the Army. My dad ran our family, just like another unit in the Army. He referred to us as his unit at home. We had little bunks with U.S. Army blankets on them. We had little foot lockers where we stored our gear right in front of there, and stuff like that. And I thought it was great. I love it. I love organization. I love neatness. I love discipline, duty, honor, country. Sign me up. I am there right now. Now, mind you, I'm 6 years old, and, but, I like it. I just like everything about it. I like knowing who's in charge. I like knowing what the rules are. I like knowing what you expect of me. But then there's a lot of things, not to like about it. And, and in the Army there's a lot of drinking that goes on all the time. In all the military, as far as I know from so many people that I've shared with, there's just an awful lot of drinking going on. And no exception in my house, the same kind of a deal going on. And, my dad was a daily drinker, and, I don't possess a memory nor a photograph of my dad that he's not holding a can of beer in his hand. And, and that's just the way it is. But as a little kid, I had absolutely no idea that alcohol was the problem. That my dad got the way that he got because he was drinking. For a very, very long time, I just thought my dad was a really mean guy, and I really didn't know why or understand why. My dad yelled a lot, and in my house, that's a big deal, because if you have a father who's a master sergeant who yells, I don't have to tell you, the volume, that they're loud. They're just loud. And 4 kids, we'd be outside playing in the backyard, and my dad would, call us into the house, and 4 children would instantly pee their pants on the spot, just to come in and find out that dinner's ready, and you just sit there through dinner with soggy underwear because you would never ever say anything. And and another time my dad could call us in the house and we'd come skipping in the door and you'd find yourself on the other side of the room, and not even know what the heck that was all about or, what was going on with that. And again, it's the disease of alcoholism in the family. And I was really fortunate, when I started coming to Al-Anon, I went to an awful lot of Alcoholics Anonymous open AA meetings as well. And at one of those meetings, I was very, very privileged to get to hear an alcoholic talk from the podium. And it seemed like his whole talk was about alcoholism, the family disease. That's just what he seemed to talk about. And he likened alcoholism in the family like having a rhinoceros in your living room, but everybody pretends it's a coffee table. And it was an absolutely perfect description of the kind of house that I grew up in, because we never said anything about my dad's drinking. You wouldn't dare say anything to him about anything like that. And, and we would be at home, and we'd all be sitting around the dinner table, and my mom had gotten to the spot where she could always tell when my dad was ready to have one of his alcoholic explosions. Now, of course, my mother could never say to us kids, okay, everybody be quiet, because your dad's going to blow up here any minute now. And, because, of course, that would cause him to blow up. So, and if you've grown up in an alcoholic home, my mom would never speak, but she would make facial expressions. And if you, all this, kind of stuff across the table, excuse me, which, was a signal to all of us, everybody be quiet and don't say anything, because your dad's, that's alcoholism facial code talk. And, so nobody would say or do anything. But, of course, if you've got an alcoholic who's going to explode, absolutely nothing is going to prevent that from happening. And sure enough, somebody would scrape their knife on a plate or spill some milk or do some, minor infraction. And there would be this huge alcoholic explosion. And everybody goes to bed. Everybody goes to bed with a spanking dinner flying across the room, the whole 9 yards. And this might be 5:30 in the afternoon, and we're all in bed sniveling and crying, including my mom. And, and then we get up in the morning and we finally muster up the courage to go down the hallway and walk into the kitchen. And you walk into the kitchen and there's my dad sitting at the breakfast table, and it's like, good morning, what do you want for breakfast? And no one ever says, gee whiz, Dad, what was that all about last night? Gee whiz, Dad, how come you had to hit everybody? How come you had to throw dinner on the floor? Nobody ever said anything because you just wanted it to be over. Hopefully today will be different, and then that rhinoceros just goes back to being a coffee table again until it's a rhinoceros, And this is just alcoholism, the family disease, it's and as my sponsor, my current sponsor always is still fond of saying, it's ordinary behavior for an alcoholic home, and it absolutely, it's just, I've talked to lots and lots of people in Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's just what goes along with it. The anger and the outbursts and the things that are just totally unbelievable and nobody's quite sure what happened. And again, I had absolutely no idea that alcohol, when I was growing up, had absolutely anything to do with it. We grew up in the military and we moved a lot, and there was just, there was just always all this drinking. It wasn't just at my house, it was at everybody else's house. And then when I was about 12 years old, my dad got out of the Army. I'm in my 12s now, and moving right along. And my dad got out of the Army, and all this time we've been living on the East Coast, and we moved to California. Now this is in the late 60s, and and moving to California in the getting out of the Army was culture shock enough. But moving to California in the late 60s, it was like a whole new planet. I mean, it was just, where are we? My dad absolutely hated it. He hated everything about it. And California in the 60s, not a very disciplinary place, not Southern California at all. And everybody's happy and hippie and free love and beads and just all this stuff going on. And it was amazing to my sisters and I. We were just blown away by it. But we started growing up and doing this thing, and, we started getting old enough to date, and it was really hard to date in my house, because my dad, was this severe disciplinarian guy, and we had a lot of rules and a lot of regulations about dating. And we had a lot of rules and regulations about everything, and that's just kind of, my dad's kind of sick way about controlling things. My dad was a big promiser of stuff, and, but of course somebody would always do something, and then we couldn't get to do that thing, or we couldn't get to have that thing. And he was always going to take us all these places and show us all these things, and when we were moving across country, all the wonderful stuff that was going to happen. But, when you travel with an alcoholic, you do stuff like you go through the painted desert at night, and, that's just how it is, and Dad stops the car, pulls over the freeway. The Grand Canyon's about 50 miles that way, girls. Everybody out to the right, and, that's about as close as we get, because that's just the way it is. If you travel with an alcoholic, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, like I say, when we move here, we start getting older and we start getting able to date, and there's all these rules and regulations involved with dating, and, and one of the rules and regulations is you got to bring the guy home to meet my dad. My dad's over 6 foot tall, has one eyebrow he can raise 6 inches off of his, right thing. Very intimidating figure, and so it was hard to date in my house. It just was very hard, because we'd bring these little weenie boys in to meet my dad, and, and my dad would do the drill, where are you going, what time are you going to be back, what part of their anatomy he's going to remove if we're not returned in the virginal condition of which we left the house, and, so... Shake your hand at the door, bring you home early. Thank you, but nobody's worth this, and, even the little hippy-dippy guys, it was way too much for them, and then this stuff just started happening in my house that happens in alcoholic homes, My mom, just started lying for us and started lying to my dad and, saying we were at a school function or that we were doing this or that we were doing that. So that we could have some kind of a semblance, so that we could go to a dance, so that we could meet up with friends. And because, alcoholism is a progressive disease, and the disease in the house that I grew up got progressively worse. And, we used to be able to bring friends home and stuff, and my dad would be this, the charming Sarge guy and all this stuff. And then other times you bring friends home, and it's not nice, and your dad's calling you all kinds of names that I cannot even begin to repeat from this podium. And I know as a kid that, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization is just not reserved for the alcoholic. And if you've ever had an alcoholic parent show up at a school function, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So subsequently you quit telling your parents you're getting an award or that this thing is happening or this function is going on. Because the embarrassment is just too great. You just can't even begin to take those kind of risks. Then sooner or later, you even quit competing and doing those kinds of things for fear that you will win. And then your parents will find out about it. And it's just this cycle that just goes on and on and on. I remember the first time that, that I really thought that there was something wrong with my family. And I was about 8 years old, so I have to regress to my 8s. And we were changing duty stations, and my dad was securing our quarters someplace else, and he'd sent my mom and my sisters and I to California to visit with my mom's family. And we spent 2 glorious weeks, and of course, and we had a great time because, of course, they took us to Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm and all this wonderful stuff. But what I remember the most about those 2 weeks was being there with my aunt and my uncle and their children. And, and my uncle tickled the kids and sat down to dinner and was just Mr. Happy Guy, and he tickled us and rubbed everybody's heads. And they just seemed to be this just really, and nobody yelled at each other, screamed at anybody, or called anybody, names, or made them stand at attention or do anything else like that. It was just this really wonderful thing. And then I remember we're flying into Chicago, and I know that my dad is waiting. We've been gone for 2 weeks, and I know that my dad is waiting for a great big hug from his oldest daughter. And I'm sitting on that airplane, and I've got this huge knot in my stomach because A, I don't want to get off this airplane, and B, I don't want to go give my dad a hug because I'm really feeling like I don't love my dad. And what I'm feeling at 8 years old is that there's something wrong with me because I know I'm supposed to love him, and I have absolutely no idea that it's the disease of alcoholism. And this is just how I've been affected by somebody else's drinking, and I'm not even the person that's drinking. So I had those feelings develop in me as a very young child, and again, it's just ordinary behavior in an alcoholic home. But anyway, getting back to, dating, it was just a hard deal in my house, and so like I said, we just started doing these things and doing whatever. When I was about 18 years old, or I was 17 years old, I met my husband. And, I should have known there was something really wrong with him because my dad liked him right away. But that went right over my head. And I went out on this date with him, and we went with this other couple, and we went bowling. And I tried not to beat him at bowling, but it was almost impossible. And we're a very competitive family. We have to win, or we don't play at all. And and this is one of the Sarge's rules. And so anyway, I remember going back from this bowling date, and I was 17, and he's a few years older than me. He was about 23 or 24 years old at the time, and he'd been married once before, and and he's living with his mom and dad, which might be another clue to me that there's something wrong with this guy, but that went over my head. And we're going to go back to his house, and he says to me, what would you like to drink? I'm going to stop at a liquor store. Now, I'm 17 years old. I'm a rule and regulation person, because I learned early on, if you follow the rules and regulations, you don't get near as much trouble as those that don't follow the rules and regulations. And my sisters will testify to that because they were not rule and regulation people. That was my deal. And, so I explained to him how I'm 17 years old, and that's not legal drinking age in the state of California, blah, 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 blah. And, but I do kind of like this guy. I don't want him to think I'm absolutely wacko, so I tell him, but I will leave it up to you to decide whatever you think would be appropriate for us to have. And he got a gallon of Red Mountain wine, if nothing else, to impress me what he could consume in one evening, by sheer volume alone. And we went back to his house, and we were playing this game, and we drank this wine, and I got just blotto. I got pretty darn drunk, and I was having a wonderful time, though. I was having a great time. And he seemed to be drinking right along, but he was just seeming to be able to maintain. And he puts me in the car to take me home on time. And, and we're in the car, and I'm kind of slumped over in the passenger seat, and he just seems to just be straight, and, the drivers, and he's got his hands in the proper regulation rule position. And I'm thinking, and he's fun. He is really fun. Now, see, my exposure up to people that have been drank has been nothing but anger and fighting and violence, And so I don't associate this. I look at him and I think this is a guy that can hold his liquor. This is a guy who knows how to behave when he's drinking. This is a whole different deal. And then Butch and I pretty much started exclusively dating from that point on. Now, it was very, very hard to date my husband because he couldn't remember my name. And, but if you want to go out with an alcoholic, you can't let some minor little detail like that. I mean, these guys require work. They just require work. And, so I wouldn't let him stammer over the phone too much when he would call or whatever, or something else like that. He was Lorraine, whatever he would call me. Yes, this is her, and we pretty much started dating exclusively from that point on. Every date we went on from that point on involved alcohol. I mean, you just didn't go out with him. I mean, no matter where you were going, if they didn't have booze there, then you just drank booze before you got there. I mean, that was just part of the whole deal. And it worked for us for a while. We had a good time behind it. It was absolutely okay for us for a little bit of time. And I used to love to take Butch to my little weenie high school parties. My friends would be there with all their little weenie, little boyfriends drinking their little weenie beer. And I like to bring old Big Bad Butch, and he was a whiskey drinker, and he liked to do the big giant glass or the chug-a-lug out of the bottle, and all these little weenie boys, their eyes would be this big watching him, and stuff, because he was their hero, and he was my contribution to the party, and, and he was fun. We were having a good time. We were absolutely having just this phenomenally wonderful time. And it worked for a while from us, and we went out, like I say, and just it involved alcohol. Now, from the very beginning, he was a heavy drinker. He got drunk every time, as far as I know. And it was just what it was all about. It was just about that part of it. And like I say, it worked for us for a while. And he was a disappearing drunk from the very beginning. You know, I mean, we weren't dating that long, and all of a sudden, poof, he's gone. Nobody's seen him for 2 or 3 days. And you know, but eventually, you know, he would show back up again, and usually it would be in the back seat of my car. You know, I'd go out to work in the morning, and you know, nobody'd seen him in 2, 3, 4, 5 days, you know, or something. I'd go out, and there he would. The first time he was asleep in the back seat of my car. Now he had breath that would knock a camel off of its feet. But, you know, and it never bothered me. I never said, where were you? What was going on? The only thing that mattered was that he came to see me first. You know, that's all that mattered. Now, he didn't do this once or twice. He did this tens of dozens of times. It got so every time he was missing for more than 24 hours, I was leaving a blanket and a pillow in the back seat of the car. Because already I'm taken care of. I have no idea that any of this stuff is going on, but already I'm taken care of and I'm compensating for and doing whatever it is I have to do to try and fix it and make it be okay. And, you know, and we dated for a couple of years, and then I ended up getting pregnant. You know, and I share this with you because later on in our life, when you know, our life got really bad behind the drinking, I was sure it was because God was punishing me. You know, because I'm a big rule and regulation person, and now I have broken the big rule and the big regulation, you know, and this was the punishment for that. You know, and I'm coming to Al-Anon for a while, you know, I got to learn that, you know, it's so easy to say, you know, that God's punishing you, you know, and when you do that, then you don't have to take any responsibility for what goes on in your life. You know, and I learned that here in these rooms, because see, when it got really bad too, and I didn't want to take any responsibility, that was an out for me. This was God punishing me, and how can you possibly do anything different to make your life be any different if you're going to hide behind the excuse that God is punishing you? But anyway, Butch and I got married about a month after our son was born, and this became a really big deal for me. I don't care if it's a big deal for you, it was a big deal for me, huge. And it was just my biggest, deepest, darkest secret. And occasionally after we were married, it would be necessary for me to go to a work function, and I would have to take my husband with me. And all the way to this work function, I would tell him, now, when they ask you what year we got married, you tell them blah, 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 so everything works out in the chronological order that I know you really want it to work out in. And I don't know how many parties you've been to, but I've yet to be to one yet where they go, Butch, it's nice to meet you. What year did you and Larcine get married? I don't know why, you know, we think, you know, that people stay up all night wondering what's going on in my life, but it was a big deal. It was a huge deal for me. The first year that I was in Al-Anon, we have an Al-Anon Family Groups Convention in Southern California every year, and we used to do the deal where we would get 2 adjoining hotel rooms, and we would cram as many women in these 2 hotel rooms as we possibly could for the weekend. You know, and and this is the very first year I'm in Al-Anon, I went to this convention. You know, they hauled me along with them and stuff, and one night we're up in the room and we're having the meeting after the meeting. And there are 6 of us in this room, and it's going around, and it seems to me, you know, my perception was that everybody was talking about their deepest, darkest secret, all these Al-Anon ladies. And so it comes around to my turn, and I tell them, I said, you know, I had to get married because I was pregnant. Well, out of 6, 5 of them had to get married because they were pregnant. And we decided the 6th one was the sickest because she married an alcoholic and didn't have to. And so, see, you are just as sick as your secrets in here, no matter what. But that was that night was a huge freedom for me. You have to know what a burden this had been my whole life. I mean, it wasn't anything I ever talked about, nothing I thought that I would ever in a million years divulge to anybody. But this program, it's freedom. It is absolutely, positively freedom. And, you know, and that night I got to let go of that. And so that first child that's born to me now, that when I look at him, I don't see an embarrassment or something that causes me pain anymore. I see a wonderful young man, and I'm so grateful to this program for opening my eyes to that. But anyway, we did get married a month after our son was born. So technically, if you ask me if I was pregnant when I got married, I was not. And this is very important. And, you know, how our lives get behind technicalities all the time, but technically I was not. And, you know, and I want you to know that up until the day that Butch and I got married, I never once said to Butch, you know, talk to him about his drinking or his drug use, you know, and he had a lot of drug use going on. It was always in my face and right up front. I had never said anything to him about any of it. But the day after we got married, the day after, I sat him down at the kitchen table, and I told him about the rules and regulations of the marriage. He sits down in the chair, and I line out the rules. You know, we've got a child now. We have responsibility and obligations. We need goals in our life. We need to save money. We need to buy a house. Once a month, we will have a babysitter, and we can go out and party. That is the limit. Do you understand the rules and regulations of the marriage? Now, he did this, which to me is as good as a yes. And, you know, now what I know today, he was so flaming loaded, his head was naturally going like this, but I took it as a yes, you know, until the very next day. Now this, mind you, the very next day is day 3 of our marriage, and he doesn't come home all night long, and let me tell you, the war has now been declared, you know. I watched my mom for years do absolutely nothing, so I knew the silent treatment didn't work. I am proud to stand before you today and tell you my husband prayed for the silent treatment. He never got it, not one time. Never. Never, never. And then the minute he would walk in the door, I was like a little Pekingese dog, just, yeah. He'd be passing out, and I'd be lifting him back up, you know, and, because by God, I was pissed. You know, the reason that I talk as fast as I do is it's really his fault. I only had so much time from when he came home to when he passed out to tell him everything there was I had to tell him. And by God, he was going to hear it. Now, I don't know why I thought that cursing would have a dramatic effect upon him. I don't know why I thought cursing would fix him, but I really believe that if you put together the right combination of 4-letter words in some order, you know, that all of a sudden, I don't know what I thought, he was going to go, "Oh, Larcine, thank you. Now I understand that I have not been doing well, and I will never do that again." That never happened. But, you know, I was just like, you know, and of course I never thought my neighbors heard a thing. I never thought they heard me screaming like a banshee at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, you have to know my husband. He's this just easy-going, fun-going guy. He never came in loud, didn't yell back. You know, all they ever heard was moi, you know, screaming at the top of her flaming lungs. And then I'd walk out in the morning with my laundry basket like Miss Susie Q. Homemaker, you know, like the night before had never happened. You know, and I tell you this because this is where the disease of alcoholism took me, and I'm not even the person that's drinking. You know, and I just developed this instant mouth, this instant foul language, and I know it was just all this anger and bitterness because I didn't know how to deal with what was going on. And I had absolutely no idea that I was dealing with a disease called alcoholism. I had absolutely no idea. Because, first of all, I'm not an alcoholic, and I don't understand the compulsion to drink. I have been to probably hundreds, maybe even by this time thousands of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I have heard alcoholics share, you know, about the disease of alcoholism, about the compulsion to drink. I do not understand it. I believe that it exists, but I just don't happen to have it. Because, see, I can take a drink or I cannot take a drink. And if taking a drink affects my family, I give it up in a heartbeat. If you told me, Larcine, you can never eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches again, you know, and your family life will be wonderful, I wouldn't have any trouble giving them up. And subsequently, I didn't understand why my husband wouldn't give up alcohol, why he wouldn't quit drinking, why he wouldn't quit doing the things over and over that were tearing our family apart. You know, and that's just, again, you know, how I'm affected by the disease of alcoholism, and I'm not even the person that's drinking. You know, and there wasn't anything I wouldn't do. But I was never really looking at the drinking, even though I knew every solution I had for him was always focused on that. You know, I never wanted him to be alcoholic. I never looked into that part of it. I didn't really even know that much about it. But, you know, every solution I had for him, you know, was always trying to, you know, get him to not do the booze thing so much. One day I sat him in the famous kitchen chair, and I pretended to pour myself, or I actually did pour myself a part of a glass of whiskey. And I took a couple sips of it, and I looked at my watch, and I said, "Gee whiz, guys, time to go home now. Dinner's ready." And I picked up the car keys, and I walked towards the door. I came back. I go, "Can you do that?" And he gives me this, you know, yeah, okay. Okay, so now when you go to the bar, that's what you do. You look at the watch, and when it's going on 6 o'clock, you go, "Okay, guys, I got to go home for dinner," you know? it wasn't that I didn't want him not to be able to drink. I just want him to do it right. Come home, do the stuff you're supposed to do. Go to work, take care of your family. What is so hard about this? And again, it's my lack of knowledge, not knowing about the disease of alcoholism, not understanding my husband's compulsion to drink. One night he's laying in bed. I spend the whole entire evening whispering in his ear, you don't want to drink, you just want to work and bring home your wife the money. And, we did this over, repeat, and stuff like that. They hear nothing when they're sleeping. Trust me on this. Absolutely nothing, because nothing changed. Absolutely nothing changed. And our life just got progressively worse, just like it does. It just gets progressively and progressively worse, and I had absolutely no idea that I was dealing with the disease of alcoholism. I thought that my husband just didn't love me, or he didn't love our son. Why would he keep doing these things over and over and over again? And then every time, after a particularly bad episode or whatever, and we would talk, and we would have that meaningful conversation the day or 2 days later, and he would sit down, and Larcine, I love you, Larcine, I'm sorry, Larcine, I promise that I will never, ever do anything like that again. I promise I won't drink anymore. And I'm telling you, I sat right across from my husband, and I looked in his eyes, and I know when he's lying, and I know when he's telling the truth. And I know that every time he looked in my face and promised me that he would never do it again, that he meant it with every fiber of his being when he was telling me that then. But he didn't know that he had the disease of alcoholism, and I didn't know that he has the disease of alcoholism. And I want you to know that when we got married, absolutely positively the driving force behind that was the fact that we had a 1-month-old son. I mean, that was the driving force behind us getting married. But I'm going to tell you the day that we got married, that when we took our wedding vows, that love and honor and cherish, that I meant that with all my heart and soul, that I believe that he meant it with all of his heart and soul, that we really did want our marriage to be a success, that we did want to nurture and cherish each other. But, it wasn't just Butch and Larcine that got married that day. It was the disease of alcoholism moved in, too. And let me tell you, alcoholism doesn't cherish anything. And alcoholism doesn't want you to love and take care of and nurture. Alcoholism means to destroy your family, and make no bones about it. And that's exactly what was going on in our home, but we had absolutely no idea. But anyway, just like I say, it gets continually worse, and it definitely did in our family. And and one time I remember getting this phone call from people that were friends of my husband's, who I affectionately refer to as scum of the earth people. And that was anybody that Butch hung out with was scum of the earth people. They called me, and of course this goes back to what was on TV at the time, but their nickname for me was Mrs. Walton, and because I was the pure driven person here. And one time these scum of the earth people call me on the phone, and they tell me, now these scum of the earth people happen to be drug pushers, and they tell me that my husband is so drunk, so loaded, so obnoxious at their house that they, the drug pushers, are going to call the police if I don't come and get him. And they have laid him across their front lawn, and so I drive up to their house, and there he is across the front lawn, and totally out of it. And he stands up and he wants to drive like, they always do, but I just pushed him and he landed in the back seat of the car. And we get back home and I have our son, and I go upstairs and put our son in his crib, and he has made the fatal mistake while I am in the house of trying to get out the car without my assistance. And he's fallen into the street, and he's laying in the middle of the street, and he's hit his head on the cement, and blood is gushing out all over the place. Now, I would like to tell you how concerned I was about his condition, but I was absolutely not. My big terror was that anyone would possibly see him. And so, and here he is. At this point, he's over 200 pounds, drunken washcloth, if you've ever tried to deal with somebody that way. And, of course, there's not any way I could lift him, so I've got him by the ankles, and I'm trying to heave him up over the curb and get him down into our apartment. And why we call, people who don't have a problem with alcoholism normies, I have absolutely no idea. Because this man drives down the street, just a regular old guy, and I've got this other guy by the ankles trying to heave him up over the curb, and this normal guy says to me, "Are you having a problem?" These are the normal people. So I told him, my husband's fallen and he can't get up, and which is... And so, and obviously he says, well, let me help you, so we get him up and, and blood's just gushing out of his head and he's got him by one side and I've got him by the other side. And we live in this townhouse in Redondo Beach and our bedroom is upstairs and I'm a rule and regulation person, injured person needs to be upstairs in bed, up in a whole nother flight of stairs. And as we're going up this flight of stairs, I'm yelling at him in my very vulgar, wonderful, usual, language, and he's, grumbling and doing his thing back at me. And this normie guy now does not want to be of service any longer. And we get him up into the bed, and I turn around, and the guy is gone, out the door. And now I look down, and my bedspread's all covered with blood, head injuries just gush it. And I am hysterical, and to show you how hysterical I am, I call 911. They didn't know what was going on. They sent a hook and ladder truck. They sent the paramedics, the police. They even got a hold of my mother. And I'm in the bedroom with our young son, and I've got him on my shoulder, and I'm crying, oh, God, this is so awful. And the paramedics clean him up. He's got a little weeny cut. Needs about 6 stitches, maybe. And but the Redondo Beach police come into me, and they say, Mrs. Gantner, your husband says he injured his head because you pushed him down this flight of stairs. And and I tell him I did not push him down a flight of stairs. I says, but if you would prop him up, I'll be happy to push him down a flight of stairs in front of the Redondo Beach police. And they assured me that wouldn't be necessary. And they clean him all up and stuff, and, like I say, he's got this little teeny-weeny cut, and, but he's too drunk to stand up, so they got to take him by ambulance to the hospital. Now, I don't know how your neighborhood is, but Friday night at 5 o'clock, a hook and ladder truck had my neighbors all out there. And then here comes Butch out in the gurney. Hiya, Frank. Hiya, Joe. His usual friendly self. I come out behind a newspaper like they won't know it's me, and I was big on anonymity back then, and off we go to the hospital. I'm in the waiting room, and the nurses are coming out. He's so funny. We love him. Bring him back anytime. And this is what I have to deal with. This is what I have to deal with. And so they bring him out, and and I wheel him in, and we get home, and it's not so friendly anymore, and he's not so friendly anymore, because I'm angry and he's doing, now he's getting angry back, and all the yelling and the screaming and all the kind of crap is going on, and I remember, he says, well, I'm going to go out and drink some more, and I literally flung my body in front of the front door, and like, haven't you done enough damage for one night? Isn't there enough embarrassment? Isn't there enough, when is it enough for you? And he pulled out a knife, and he said he was going to go out and drink some more. And I had that, I guess, a moment of clarity that they talk about in the program, and out the door he went. And somewhere in all that insanity, I called the Council on Alcoholism. Don't even ask me why or how I even knew about it or heard about it. I have absolutely no idea. But I started telling this woman all the stuff that was going on in my life, and no matter what I would say, she would just say, I know. And she asked if she could send me some literature, and I told her that she could, and I remember it coming to the house. And, but do I remember opening it? I really don't. I don't know, because, more than likely what had happened, 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however many days it took for that package to get there had arrived, and things had gone back to how I wanted them to be again. One more time that, rhinoceros goes back to being a coffee table. And that's just the progressive stuff that constantly goes on over and over and over. It's just the way that it is with alcoholism and my reactions to it all the time. Just wasn't anything that I wouldn't do to fix him. And he started getting, he was always this easygoing guy and stuff, and then the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality that they talk about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous started happening in our house, and he wasn't always so easygoing anymore. And I remember one night I'm laying in bed, and it's like about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then he comes and he's drunk as a skunk, and he wakes me up to show you how flaming drunk he was. And he says to me, go make me some dinner, and he had never done anything like that before, and it really scared me, it frightened me, and I kind of scurried into the kitchen, but then I woke up and remembered who he was dealing with, and I made a Mexican casserole that called for 1 jalapeno pepper, but of course I had a whole can of those things in the refrigerator, so I just stuffed every single one of those jalapeno peppers in there. Now his mouth must have been on flame and fire, but he's so drunk. And then he did what I wanted him to do, and that's go in the bathroom and puke his brains out. Because I don't know how you are, but when my alcoholic throws up, I get a warm feeling all over. It lasts me for days. And this is where it is. This is where the disease of alcoholism. He's in the bathroom puking, and I'm in the bedroom giggling my little fanny off here, and stuff, because it's turned into a war. You know, it has absolutely, positively turned into a war. I did a lot of things to my husband I am not proud of, but I did all those things behind the guise of being a good wife. There's one thing that I didn't justify behind my having to do that to try and help him, to try and make it be okay for him. And I don't tell you that because I'm proud of it. I tell you because that's where the disease of alcoholism took us. You know, and I want you to know, that in the beginning, I would start to do things, or I would say horrible things to him when he was hungover and he was remorseful and he was sorry, and I wanted him to pay even more. And I would say all these hurtful things that I could tell by looking at his face were absolutely tearing him up. And I would get that little twinge inside that would say, Larcine, stop doing that. You're not helping. You're making it worse. But see, what ends up happening is his wrongs is always so big, and my wrongs seem so little compared to that. And as a progressive disease for the alcoholic, I believe it is a progressive disease for the Al-Anon, because it wasn't that long before my wrongs were just as big as his, but I couldn't even differentiate anymore between his and mine. And again, this is where the disease of alcoholism took me, and I'm not even the person that's drinking. I'm doing all of this stone cold sober. And so I decide, that he needs obviously a little bit more help. So let's get pregnant with another kid. There's not enough pressure on this or whatever, and these are just all the things that I've heard so many people in the program share. The lengths we'll go to try and make it be better. This'll fix it. That'll fix it. And just that series of things that we go over and over and over. God talks to me in lots of ways, and one time I got this little bazooka bubble gum, and you know how they have the little fortune on the bottom? And my little bazooka bubble gum says, if at first you don't succeed, you're doing it wrong. And that's a big deal for me, because I just kept doing it wrong over and over and over and over again. And somewhere in all this stuff, I started looking into alcoholism. I started recognizing that, that this was really a problem in our life, and I didn't want to make any major commitments to doing anything. And I went to a bookstore and I read about alcoholism, but I do what I always do: I flip to the end, because I don't need the beginning part. I just want to know how it ends and how you fix it. And in one of these books I read about an abuse. And, an abuse is a pill. If you take it, you have these terrible reactions, when you drink, so therefore you can't drink when you're taking an abuse. And I thought, perfect solution, an abuse. It's a pill. He likes pills. I can do this. And, and so I took him home and I talked to him about an abuse, and we went to the doctor, and he took an abuse for 2 years, and he didn't drink a drop of alcohol for that whole 2-year period. And I want you to know, we got rid of the alcohol, but the ism was alive and well in our house, because absolutely nothing changed. What my husband did in place of drinking was just take an exorbitant amount of drugs, because he is totally uncomfortable in his own skin without alcohol in it, so he just switched to something else. And like I say, absolutely nothing changed in our house. And somewhere in that insanity, I went to my very first Al-Anon meeting. Don't even ask me what made me go to that, but I guess it was just one of those. And I had I'd gone to school with this girl, and I know that her mother had gotten sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that her dad was going to Al-Anon. And so I called him, and he said, "Yeah, I'll be happy to take you to a meeting." And they took me to this meeting, and at a local Al-Anon club by us, and of course I didn't want to be there when I actually got there, but it was a good meeting, lots of good sharing, wonderful literature on the table, but not the piece of literature that I want, and that's the piece that says how to get them to stop drinking and do what you want them to do. I wasn't interested in a merry-go-round named denial or understanding ourselves or any of that other garbage they were saying. Then they did the clincher at that meeting. They said, if somebody's drinking bothers you, then you should go to Al-Anon. Well, there's the difference. See, you people are bothered. I am pissed off. Huge, huge difference. Flies bothered me. His drinking pissed me off, When you have a meeting for pissed off people, give me a call, and that was my deal, and what I know today is that is what separated. I'm looking for a difference. So, and if you're new here and you're looking for a reason not to be here, trust me, you will find it. You will absolutely find it. Because I'm here to tell you that when I sat at that meeting and they said, Larcine, are you willing, or not are you willing, but do you want your life to be different? God, with all my heart and soul, when I was sitting at that first Al-Anon meeting, did I want my life to be different? Larcine, what are you willing to do about it? Nothing. Let me tell you, absolutely nothing. Because it wasn't my problem. It was his problem. You fix him and I'll be okay. But I'm here to tell you, how can you possibly expect your life to be any different if you're not willing to do anything? If you're not willing to do even the slightest thing to make it be different, because you're blaming somebody else for everything else that's going on in your life. And again, this is how I'm affected by the disease of alcoholism, and I'm not even the person that's drinking. And then we went back to it again, and, the last 9 months of my husband's drinking, is pretty much a blackout for him and pretty much a whiteout for me. I used to come home and pray that his truck would be there. Now I was to the point where I was praying that it wouldn't be there. Because he had totally developed this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality, and he was on a constant drunk, from, that point on pretty much. And it, like I say, it was absolutely crazy. And I remember at the very, very end of that drinking, one more time we were in this toe-to-toe fight, screaming and yelling at each other. And I was and what I was doing now was I was trying to get him to hit me, because we hadn't had any violence in our home up until this point. And see, my deal is I just keep pushing harder. I don't know what I'm pushing towards, but I'm obviously not pushing hard enough. So now I'm in his face, and I'm egging him on to try and hit me. And I remember all of a sudden being very, very conscious of our two little boys, and at that point they were about 5 and 3 years old. And I looked down, and on either side of me is both of my sons, and they're yanking on my pants, and I look down, and they're begging me. They're crying. These little guys are crying, and they're begging me to please stop yelling at their father. Now, I would like to tell you I had a moment of clarity there, but I absolutely positively did not. What I did was I became very, very angry at those two little boys. How dare they? How dare they tell me to stop yelling at their dad? He's the problem. He's the one. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be doing this. This stuff wouldn't be happening in our life. And when I get done yelling at these two innocent little children, I look up and I watch my drunken, loaded husband start walking out the door. And I ask him where the hell he thinks he's going. And my drunken, loaded husband turns to me and says, "I'm leaving because we're upsetting the children." And I don't tell you this story because I'm proud of it. I tell you because this is where the disease of alcoholism took me. My wrongs are way, way bigger now than the alcoholics, and I don't even know it. I have absolutely no idea, because I am so consumed with anger, so consumed with resentment. That I don't have any capacity for love or compassion or understanding anymore. And this is where the disease of alcoholism took me, and I am the non-drinker. When my husband ended up getting sober, his last drunk on a scale of 1 to 10, why, that's the one that got him sober. I can't even tell you. I wouldn't even give it a 5. But that's the one that he ended up getting sober on. And that particular evening, I had called about this hospital I'd heard about that had an alcoholism program. I told them what was going on in my house. They said that if my husband were drunk, I could have him committed, but that after he sobered up, if he didn't want to stay, he didn't have to. And they gave me the number of the doctor on call that night. And then my husband got arrested for drunk driving that evening, which is not unusual. My husband's been arrested lots of times for drunk driving. And the next morning I went to go get him, and I knew that God was working in my husband's life, even though I don't believe that God was necessarily working in mine at the time. Because, I went and picked up my husband, and I had the number of this hospital, and I'm, as you well know, I'm a yacker and a talker, and he gets in the car, and I say nothing. I say absolutely nothing. And believe you me, it takes a power greater than anything you've ever seen in your life to keep my mouth shut. And I said nothing to him about being arrested, about losing his truck, nothing. I said nothing about this doctor, this program, absolutely nothing. We go home, he goes upstairs for about 2 days, and then he comes back down after 2 days and tells me, I think I got a problem with drinking and I need some help. And I reached into my pocket and I gave him the number of this doctor that was on call, and I left the room. And that's why I think that God was working in Butch's life, because I think God literally pushed me out of the way so that my husband could find sobriety. Because Butch made the phone call. Butch put himself in the hospital. And I remember taking him into the hospital, and they were going to put him in the psychiatric unit for a couple of weeks because they had to detox him from all the pills and the Valium and all that other crap and the alcohol and everything that he'd had in his system. And as I'm getting to the end of the hall and I'm getting ready to leave, he reaches and, he calls me back. And I walk all the way down, and I think it's because he changed his mind and he doesn't want to stay, which is perfectly fine with me, because at this point I'm not too crazy about leaving my husband in a psychiatric unit. What will the neighbors say? And instead he reaches into his pocket and he handed me the Valium that he brought in case of emergency. And I knew he'd never parted with the Valium in his life. And I knew that something was different. I knew something was different. I went home and I took that Valium because I was just a basket case. And, and he stayed in that psychiatric, unit for a couple of weeks. And And it was just a weird thing for me because I go to visit him at the psychiatric unit. Now, what you got to know is I've got a husband in the psychiatric unit being treated for alcoholism. I've got a son in kindergarten and one in preschool. Now, to cheer up my husband, I would bring him the things that the boys had made in kindergarten and preschool. He didn't want to see that. He wanted to show me what he made in occupational therapy that day. So I take it home and I'd show the boys, look what Daddy did, and we'd hang it on the refrigerator. We were so proud. And this is my introduction to new sobriety, and what it's going to be like for us. And as Mary shared last night, I'm with her. I'd have settled for that. I like it that they lock them up. They put them away every night, and you know what they're feeding them, and they're taking care of them, and you got professional people watching them. I think we need that. But it was working for me. But after 2 weeks, they introduced him to the alcoholism side of that portion. He got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, and since July 21st, 1979, he has drawn a sober breath every single day, of which I am eternally grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have been truly blessed. Now, I like to tell you, when I went there, they didn't have the real intense family stuff that they have now. I met with his counselor one time. She said, you should go to a Al-Anon meeting. I am a rule and regulation person. I went to a Al-Anon meeting. And my attitude at that meeting was, I came to you guys. I asked you how to get them sober and do what I want them to do. You didn't tell me squat Ola. And so... he's sober, I win, nanny, nanny, nanny. I don't need you people. It's just the way I want it to be. And that was my second Al-Anon meeting. And they were loving and kind, as they always are. And I'm sure I was discussion at the coffee break. Who knows? But I know there was no gossip or criticism, for a fact. And... because they love me in a very special way. And anyway, so my husband starts going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Now, I start going with him because he needs help. And I go to the first 6 months to make sure he hears the stuff he needs to hear. But after 6 months, I got tired of going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought he should too. I'm like, God, there's only 12 steps. How stupid are you? Let's move along. And... oh, no. He made it clear. Alcoholics Anonymous is the most important thing in my life. I'm sure his sponsor said, go home and tell your wife that. She will love it. And so, Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous. It's wonderful. Blah, blah, blah. Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was staying sober, and he was doing the stuff he was supposed to be doing, and he was going to meetings. And, we talked about Alcoholics Anonymous. And he went to meetings every single solitary day. But after 6 months, like I say, I got tired of going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I got tired of him going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And seeing what ended up happening was after 6 months, I was watching my husband grow in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was watching him work a program. I was watching him try and bring it home. I was watching, all my life I've been holding this spot, waiting for him to grow up and get it together. And now he was doing it. But I tell you what happened to me is I became terrified because he was changing and he was getting healthy. And I didn't know how to turn it off. I didn't know how not to be angry. I didn't know how not to react to every minor thing that went on with anger and resentment. I didn't know how to get rid of that. And it's like my friend Crazy Jean says, it's like they get sober and you're out of a job. And that was just how it was for me. Because when being married to a practicing alcoholic, you got a built-in excuse for every bad thing you ever say, for every bad thing you ever do. And now I got a man in my home who's working Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. And you see, I'd always says, when Butch is sober, I'm going to be okay. When Butch is a good husband, I'm going to be just fine. When Butch is a good father, I'm going to be just, everything is going to be okie dokie. When Butch goes to work regularly and brings home a regular paycheck, I'm going to be just fine. And here we are 6 months into this deal, and he's doing all those things, way beyond any expectations I even ever had for him. And I'm a raving lunatic. Absolutely nuts. And we went on this way for almost 2 years. And then when he was almost 2 years sober, he decided he was going to go to a conference, and it was going to be down in Palm Springs, and I could go or not go, but he was going to go to this deal. And Palm Springs, oh my God, there's going to be alcoholic women down there. And I knew that they were after him. We all know they're after them. And isn't that just the poetic justice? You get them sober and some alcoholic broad steals them away from you, boy. That's the plot. Chapter 5, how it works. I know all about it. And now, of course, this is all by myself in my little bitty head. And so anyway, because I would go with Butch to AA meetings occasionally when there was anniversary and stuff, and AA women would walk up to me, "Are you Butch's wife?" "Yes, we just love him." Yeah. Yeah, you love him now. You should have seen him before. Yeah, then we'll talk about it. But anyway, we went down to this convention, and he tricked me into going to the family meeting. And at the family meeting, they had an AA speaker, an Al-Anon speaker, and an Al-Anon speaker. And what happened to me at that meeting was I became this much willing to do something different. So when we got back in the car and we were headed back to L.A., I told him, I'm going to start going to Al-Anon. I'm going to give it a try. And I'm so fortunate. I'm really blessed because I'm one of the people that got to come to Al-Anon for all the right reasons. I didn't come to get an alcoholic sober. He already was. I didn't come to keep him sober. He was almost 2 years sober, doing a great job on his own. I came because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm a rule and regulation person. I went to my first meeting, and they said, we get a sponsor, we work the steps, we read the literature, and we go to meetings. Hell, just tell me the rules and regulations. I'm all over it. And, and I started doing those things. I got a sponsor right away, and I see people in Al-Anon, God, they're in for years, and they still don't have a sponsor because they're looking for somebody just like them. You are wasting your time, and you're dumb, too. And I hate to tell you. I got a sponsor who was just the opposite of me. Why do you want somebody like you? Then she knows your stuff. That gives her a big advantage over you. And, no, I got somebody who was older than my mother, who had never lived with sobriety, who was divorced from her alcoholic, who didn't have any children. I got someone who had a thick Dutch accent. You couldn't understand a bloody word she said. This is my idea of a sponsor. I love this woman right away. And I remember the very first time I used her as a sponsor. Butch was going out to work, and he had a dead battery, and his truck wouldn't start. So I went out and I jumped it. And after I jumped it, he ran out of gas. Now, I used to say that he yelled at me. What I know today is after you have a dead battery and you run out of gas, that might tick you off, and you can be mad if you want. You just don't have to stay there for 17 years. But he got angry, and so he yelled, and I did what I always did when he yelled. I yelled right back at him, and he stormed off to work, and I went upstairs, called my sponsor, and reported his behavior. And told her what happened. Everything. When I'm all done, she says to me, "Larcine, when Butch gets home, you tell him you're sorry for what you said." Now, first of all, Jeannie's not from America, and she doesn't understand how we do things in America, and she missed the crucial who started it, which I always think is so important when you're telling a story. But I didn't want to insult her because she is my sponsor, and that's a higher level of authority as far as I know. And so rather than tell her, "You dummy, weren't you listening to what I said?" I just told her the story again, hoping she would pick up on the stuff that she missed. And about halfway through the second telling, she stopped me cold, and she says, "Don't tell me this story. I heard you the first time." And she says, "And don't ever call me again and start a conversation with Butch said or Butch did. I am not Butch's sponsor. I am Larcine's sponsor. And for what Larcine said, she owes her husband's amends. I'll see you at the meeting tonight. Click. Goodbye. End of conversation." Now, I learned valuable lessons. Never call your sponsor in the morning because you got all day long to think about what she told you about. Never call your sponsor when you're going to see her that night at a meeting because she's going to want to know if you followed directions. So I got all day long to think about this, and it was just, oh my God. So when Butch got home that evening, when he walked in the door, I told him I was sorry I let his crappy attitude affect me the way that it had. And that I would try and do better in the future. Now, I know that doesn't sound like much of an amends, but what you have to remember is up until that point, I'd never, ever told him I was sorry for nothing. And this program is not about making these big leaps and bounds and going through the 12 steps at the speed of light and becoming a spiritual giant as quickly as you possibly can. What was told to me is that this program is about this much at a time, and I was this much willing to do something different. And that's all you need to be, is just this much willing. I see people beat themselves out of Al-Anon all the time, and they say they don't get it, that they're not getting it, that they're not getting it quick enough or fast enough. And nowhere in our literature does it say anything about quick or fast. It says progress, not perfection. We do it as, and because I was able to do it just this much, I am to the point now when I can make amends today. Granted, everybody still feigns having a heart attack at my house, but I am able to say that I am sorry when it is called for, though that infrequently happens, but it does happen. But see, it's just about just trying to do it a little bit different, and from that point on, that's just all that it's been for me. And my sponsor has worked with me on so many things, and another thing that was really hard for me when I got here was God. I wasn't brought up in any kind of religion or anything else like that, and any concept of God I had was totally like a punishing thing and deserved. In my own heart, I think part of the reason I had trouble with the higher concept was because I believed I should be punished for the horrible things I had said and done to my family. And I remember one time, having a hard time with the concept of God and getting the God of my understanding. And my home group that evening shared, the whole meeting was dedicated to Larcine finding a higher power. Everybody in that room shared about their God with me. And after the meeting, my friend Crazy Jean came up to me and he said, "Larcine, did everybody share and help you? Did it help you find a higher power, something you can look to, to start, put you on that path to finding a God?" And in my sarcastic, self, I told Jean, I appreciate everybody sharing, but it isn't going to work for me. It's just not going to happen. And Jean said to me, "Larcine, I want to tell you something." He goes, "You know why God gave you ears?" And yes, Jean, so I can hear what you guys are trying to tell me. And Jean said, "Larcine, in most people's cases that's true, but in your case, God gave you ears so you'd have something to hold on to while you yank your head out of your ass." And and that's how I got my God that night, and because that's literally what I had to do. Because fear keeps my head stuck up there. It's scary, but it's warm there, and I know what it feels like. But taking that step of faith, just putting it out there just a little bit, and watching the examples that have been before me. That's been the whole thing. My sponsor, Jeannie, she was huge on gratitude. The woman was always cramming down my throat how grateful I should be. Jeannie never had sobriety in her home. She didn't have little kids. She didn't have any of that kind of stuff. And, and she was always so grateful for it and always thought I should be so grateful for it. But at every opportunity I ever got, I'd call her, like when they did the skit last night about the sponsor just, falling down, just always I had something to moan and complain about with her. But no matter what I would call her about, she would turn it back around on me, and show me what I should be grateful for about. And as an example, one time I'm cleaning up the bathroom and I'm cleaning out the toilet, and I've got a husband and two children, and two boy children, so I don't have to tell you what the toilet looks like at my house sometimes. And I resent having to clean all this crap up because they can't hit the spot. And so I call up Jeannie and I tell her what I'm doing and my resentment of the day. And without missing a beat, Jeannie says to me, "You should be grateful that your husband and your children have healthy penises." And now, I don't tell you this story so I can say penis from the podium, even though it is kind of fun. But because when she said that to me, that's when I surrendered to Jeannie. Jeannie, what's the deal? Why do I always have to find the gratitude in what's going on in my life? She says, "Larcine, because there's so much to be grateful for." And she says, "And it kills me to watch you, to have sobriety in your home, to have a program to work, to have healthy children, to be, surrounded with all this love and recovery, and still, the disease of alcoholism in you seeks out what to be angry about, what to be resentful about." And Jeannie said, "I'm here to tell you, if you work on gratitude, Larcine, you will get rid of your resentment, because you cannot be grateful and resentful at the same time." So, of course, I spent the whole bloody day trying to be grateful and resentful at the same time. Now, I could be grateful and I could be resentful, but I could not do them simultaneously. And let me tell you, grateful feels a heck of a lot better than resentful does. And from that day to this, and Jeannie has long since died, no matter what happens in my life, no matter what horrible thing comes down the pike, there was always something grateful in it. And including, the death of my sister and my father, behind alcoholism, even though those were the worst days of my life, I was totally surrounded by people in the program who loved me and walked me through that. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And that's just the deal for me, and one day at a time, this much at a time, it just keeps getting better and better and better. When you talk about your circle and your circle of hope, we all stand around together, but it's when we join hands, that we pass that hope from each other, from one person to another person to another person in this room. And the real heroes in this room, aren't the speakers that come from wherever the heck they come from and stand at these podiums and talk to you. The heroes are the people more than likely you're sitting next to right now, the people that you love and that love you. And that, just the same thing in my home group, that walk us through all those kinds of things one day at a time. And that's been the gift that's been given me. And I'm just going to close with this story because I don't want you to think I'm even anywhere close to perfect. But I got to share this story because my sponsor really likes it, and it just tells you a little bit about why I keep coming back and why it's so important for me. A few years back, maybe 3 years ago, I was at a conference much like this one. Had a wonderful time. Come back on Sunday, just full of spirituality and serenity, just feeling wonderful. And I walk into the garage because I keep a treadmill in there, and I like to exercise on that thing. And I go out into that treadmill, and my son, who was then living at home, and this is my youngest son, who at the time is about 20 years old, and he has his weight bench that's right next to my treadmill. And as I'm getting ready to get on my treadmill, I notice there's a driver's license. And I pick up this driver's license, and it's the driver's license of a woman who's approximately 32 years old and lives in Glendora. Now, immediately, now, mind you, I've just come back from a conference. I'm full of serenity and wonderfulness. I look at this driver's license. I see this woman is 32 years old, and she's from Glendora. I immediately surmise that she has been in my house over the weekend, had sex with my 20-year-old son, has 2 children, wants to move in with us, and call me Mom. I mean, in 10 seconds or less, this is my story. I am panic-stricken. I walk into the living room, hand the driver's license to my husband, who looks at it and goes, "Yeah? No imagination whatsoever here." And I tell him my story. And he's like, "You are out of your flaming mind. Call your sponsor immediately." So I call my sponsor, Carol, and, Carol affirms my husband's synopsis that I'm out of my flaming mind and tells me to go walk on my treadmill and not to mention one bloody word to my son about this driver's license. And so anyway, a couple days goes by, and my son goes to school and works at nights and all this stuff, and I work during the day, so a lot of times we don't see each other for a couple of, days. And I happen to be in the kitchen this one evening, and I'm fixing dinner, and in he walks, and he's got this driver's license in his hand. And he goes, "Mom, what do you do when you find a driver's license?" Now, I didn't tell him what I do, because that would not be a good example. But this is why I keep coming back. Because left by myself, I am a dangerous person. But it blows my mind that I had to come to a room full of strangers to learn how to love myself, to learn how to think right, to learn how to love my kids, to learn how to love my family, to learn how to be of service and give back that which was so freely given to me. You love on each other, you take care of each other, and you just keep hanging on. And thank you so much for having us. We've had a great time.